and there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment from very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Wednesday. I got a fantastic surprise this morning. We were scheduled to do the Cowboy State Politics live program from the home studio, the original studio, and then Agent 29 finally decided to come back to work. So we're doing today's broadcast from our usual location. So welcome back to the program after a long weekend. Long weekend for us, probably not for you. You've probably been slaving away at work, but both Agent 29 and I took some time away and went on a couple little adventures, so welcome back to the show. If you want to be part of the program, the phone number here in the studio is 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989. Now, if you've looked at the news in Wyoming, the cow pie, the turkey vulture, the Pravda on the Platte, you'll notice a veritable lack of anything substantive to talk about in the Cowboy State. And so today we're just going to kind of run around the news. And I've got a couple of stories that I think you've definitely heard of in the national media. So we begin this morning with redistricting. Of course, you're aware that a whole bunch of Democrats in Texas have decided that they're against gerrymandering. Oh, and by the way, it is not gerrymandering. It is gerrymandering, named after the guy named Elbridge Gerry, who first monkeyed around with legislative districts. And I want to say it was in Massachusetts, but don't quote me on that. But anyway, he was the first guy, actually a very prominent statesman, but he was the first guy to jack around with a legislative district and draw it all crazy.
Yeah, it's also not nuclear.
It is not
It's
nuclear. It's nuclear.
But I think sometimes we might as well just shovel sand into the ocean as think we're actually going to fix something.
Yeah, well, that doesn't mean that we can't be opposed to it, Ken. I mean, we should absolutely correct things that are incorrect. Anyway, so redistricting. What is it? Well, we have this principle, and it comes from a Supreme Court ruling, and it's called one man, one vote. And every 10 years, or at least in Wyoming, every 10 years, our legislature gets together and they decide, they don't decide, they look at the population differences between, across the entire state. And, one county will have more people move in and one county will have people leave. And so the representation changes. And in House districts, you have one representative for every roughly 10,000 citizens. And that's kind of the number that they shoot for. Legislative districts, Senate districts, I'm not exactly sure. Ken, do you know how many constituents a Senate district has?
I'm sorry, I was distracted for here in Wyoming.
Yeah.
About 20,000.
20,000.
It's basically two House districts.
Okay. So anyway, 10,000 for a House district, 20,000 for a Senate district. And so every 10 years, the legislature looks at the population and decides on how the districts are going to be drawn. Now, you might be able to make, not might be, you would be able to make the argument that Wyoming's districts are kind of gerrymandered as well, because if you look at, say, so Agent 29's district, his is kind of strange. It's kind of the middle of Sheridan, like kind of downtown, and then there's this big loop that goes up around the west side of Sheridan, and then kind of goes over by my house, which I kind of live on the northeast side of Sheridan. So his district is kind of weird, and it's not set up to where there are just little squares and where the whole thing is gridded out. Like the legislative map does not look like that at all. Well, in Texas, Republicans are poised to gain, I think the number I heard was 5 representatives in Congress. And the Democrats are freaking out, and they have up and left the state. And the reason for that is so that they can deny the House of Representatives in Texas a quorum. If you don't have a quorum, you can't conduct business. The interesting thing, though, is the Democrats have fled to Illinois, one of the states that is most gerrymandered in the entire country. Where Democrats have controlled the state for a really long time, and they've switched around legislative districts so much that there really is no rhyme or reason. There's one of them, and I don't remember which state it is. Maybe I should look it up. But they call it the Salamander. Let's see here, Salamander District. Here it is. So this is an old picture of it, but this is where, oh, no, that's what they made it into. Hold on just a second. Now, you would think, let's see here. Here we go. Here's a good example of it. And I'll show you this. I'll show you this in just a second. But the whole problem here is when legislatures draw a district to benefit their own party. And there's 2 main goals of gerrymandering. And the first one is to deny your opponents, the other party, representation, and so that you always have a permanent majority. And the other one is to decrease their power, which I guess they're one and the same. But really, when you break it down, that's what the whole purpose is. So, Ken, go ahead and throw up. Don't throw up. show this picture up on the screen. You can kind of see it. Let's see here. So, yeah, that's a legislative district in. Where is it? It doesn't really. Here's a better picture of it. And notice you got salamanders. And the reason you see that is it's called the Salamander District. Look at how weird it is. But that's a legislative district that was drawn. That is definitely gerrymandered. And so it's both parties have done this. It's not just the Democrats. It's not just the Republicans. It's both of them. Anytime you've got a group in power, they're going to monkey around with the legislative districts, and that's basically what's happening in Texas. So, I mean, Ken, I remember the last redistricting effort in Wyoming, and it was an S show. I mean, it was crazy the gerrymandering that was going on, and the perfect example is right where we live. There was an effort by Bo Beitman. Then Senator Dave Kinski, Barry Crago, and your predecessor. What was his name? Oh, I forget. I don't even think it's
I
important.
can't remember. Rhino something.
Rhino something rather. Anyway, they attempted to deprive Mark Jennings of a big portion of his district and the most conservative part of his district. And when they got to the meetings, the map was all drawn, all sorts of crazy. And, their argument is, well, this is where the people live. Well, that's bullcrap.
Certain people.
Certain people.
It's funny because the middle of the street in front of my house is a boundary line.
Yeah.
And I think if they had been thinking, they could have moved it one street behind me, which would have made sense, or even up on Laux, two blocks away, and pitted a couple of us together.
Yeah.
But they missed that one, so...
The one that they didn't miss was Dan Zwanitzer. Now, Dan Zwanitzer used to represent House District 43 down in Laramie County, and he represented it for a really long time. Well, he moved out of his district to House District 10. I've talked about this a lot on the program. But during redistricting, he drew a little box around his house and included it in House District 43. So gerrymandering is something that always happens, and both parties have done it. And I don't think that the effort in Texas is to create any other, crazy districts like the one I showed you. I think it's just to look at the population and say, well, the population is increased in these particular areas, and so we're going to add some representatives. So anyway, that's what's going on in Texas, and we'll keep an eye on it for you. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is legislative ratings. And if you've listened to my program for any length of time, you've heard me talk about this a lot, and I think it's pretty representative of, how our legislators are doing here. Pretty quick, the ratings from WyoVote are going to come out, and I know I keep saying that, and I've got an advanced copy of them. I can't show them to you yet, but they're pretty revealing. And so you have a number of different agencies, both in the state and federally, and they look at certain votes and they rate each legislator according to their own agenda. Now, the first thing to understand is that each one of these rating agencies, with the exception of, in my opinion, one or two of them, they all have their own agenda. So, for example, Club for Growth, they're largely conservative, interested in legislators who are going to, are more business friendly than others. And so they rate legislators according to their own agenda. Another one of those is the John Birch Society. Now, the John Birch Society, they take a lot of flack, but they're the main opponents of the Article 5 convention. And their big thing is to support the Constitution. And the reason I know that is I used to be a member of the John Birch Society. The reason I'm not right now is I just haven't paid my dues for it. But anyway, I
feel like I've paid my dues.
Yeah. Well, if your voting record was a little bit worse, Ken, you would have paid way more than other people and beaten up a little bit.
Sorry, hit the wrong button, believe it or not. It is funny because when they initially came out with there were only two of us that got 100% from the JBS. And now there's a third. I don't remember off the top of my head right now, but it just, all that happens to be is that they happen to be aligned with where I'm at.
Sure.
And so we agree. There are other very conservative sites where I don't rate quite as high because they have one or two things, or because they didn't actually read the ESA bill.
Well, that could be too. And we're going to talk about that here in just a second. But I think the first thing to remember is a lot of these rating agencies, whether it's JBS or whether it's CPAC or the NRA or Gun Owners of America or any of those, most of them are rated based on, that particular group's agenda, whatever it happens to be, guns or business or whatever. And I think that it is perfectly natural for legislators to try to defend their votes. In fact, I think that they should. The way that you vote, you should go back to your constituents and say, hey, these are the reasons why I voted the way that I did. However, I don't know that it does you a whole lot of service to complain about how the ratings come out. You see that from a lot of different legislators. Typically the redcoats, they don't like the public knowing how they vote. And so you get a lot of complaints for them. But I saw a post on Facebook, and I don't often talk about the things that I see on social media. However, in this case, I think it's a good one. Now, I'm not going to mention the guy's name. He can come on the program if he wants to talk about it. But the first one, and a lot of legislators complain about this, but JBS always chooses the Article 5 convention as one of the bills that they rate. They're against it. Secondly, their view is that it is anti-constitutional, which is also my view, by the way, which is interesting because it happens to be in the Constitution. So you might be saying, well, Dave, how could you have something that's in the Constitution be unconstitutional? I'm not saying that it's unconstitutional. What I'm saying is that it is anti-constitutional. Let me explain the difference. One, unconstitutional means that it doesn't comport with the Constitution. Anti-constitution, in my view, means that it would have a negative effect on our existing Constitution, and that's what I'm arguing. You see, in Article 5, there's two methods to amend the U.S. Constitution. One of them is the way that we've always done it. that Congress proposes an amendment, they pass it, it gets sent out to the states, and the states either ratify it or not. Every single amendment to the Constitution has been added that way. And, for a while, Convention of States Action, which is the marketing organization pushing the Article 5 Convention, they once claimed that the Bill of Rights was added through an Article 5 convention. It was not. That is not true at all. In fact, James Madison said that would be, I mean, really, you just finished a constitutional convention and you want to do it again? That's ridiculous. They added the Bill of Rights through the amendment process. The first one, that is, Congress proposes an amendment and it gets ratified by the states. So why do I say that it's anti-constitutional? Simply because the second method to amend the Constitution would be to call a convention. And it doesn't really matter what topics you pick to the reasons behind calling the convention. If you look at every resolution that's used to apply for the Article 5 convention, they always list things like a balanced budget, term limits, rein in the power of the federal government. Notice nobody really knows what reining in the power of the federal government means. It could mean a whole bunch of different things. But it doesn't really matter what those reasons are, because once an Article 5 convention is started, once they get the whole ball rolling, you have no idea what's going to be proposed, because the only thing that an Article 5 convention cannot do is also listed in Article 5, and that is to outlaw slavery prior to 1808 and to deprive a state of its representation in the Senate. Those are the only two things that an Article 5 convention can't do, and they're both listed in the Constitution. So how could it be anti-constitutional? Well, take, for example, Hawaii's application to join an Article 5 convention. In many places, it reads word for word what the application from Wyoming does. Word for word. The only difference is they want to repeal the Second Amendment. It doesn't say that in Wyoming's application. So you might be saying, now, wait a minute, Dave, how could they do such thing? And this is the argument from Convention of States Action, that once this thing gets to a convention, there's multiple ways for something can fail. Well, riddle me this, riddle me that. Have there ever been any bad amendments to the Constitution? Have there ever been any of them that, maybe we in hindsight, we look at them and say, man, that was a dumb idea. Maybe, I don't know, prohibition, maybe income tax, maybe a whole bunch of things that were added to the Constitution. Of course, prohibition was repealed a couple of years later. They said, oh, man, that's not a very good idea. So when you get to an Article 5 convention, anything can happen. And so if you are going to vote for an Article 5 convention, it means that you're in favor of radically changing the Constitution as it sits. And if you are a conservative, conservatism being defined as, keeping things the way that they are, relying on old, with the original document, following the Constitution, those sorts of things, you wouldn't want to vote for an Article 5 convention.
Conservative in a nutshell is kind of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, exactly right. And we don't have a problem with the Constitution. We have a problem with politicians who don't follow the Constitution. So you can change it any way that you want. You can add any amendment that you want to it, but if you don't change the butts in the seats, you're not going to have any difference whatsoever. They don't follow the Constitution now. So what leads you to believe that they're going to follow any amendment that you pass? And so that's probably the biggest reason why the Article 5 convention is included in the JBS ratings. Now, another interesting one that they chose was the ESA bill. And this one is, it's been kind of a bone of contention among conservatives in that, we do want parents to have the ability to choose whichever school they want to send their kid to, or if they want to just educate them at home, you should have that choice. The problem comes in when you include the government in any of that. There is no place in the Constitution whatsoever that gives the federal government power over education. It's not listed anywhere. It is in the Wyoming Constitution. It is not in the federal Constitution. The other problem with House Bill 199, which was the ESA bill, is that it creates a whole big giant entitlement, universal pre-K, which is something that if you're a conservative, if you're a Republican, you should not be in favor of that at all.
Well, I certainly wasn't, and that's one of the reasons that I was one of the few that voted against it. And, the attitude on the floor was, because we worked really hard to try to get this.
Yeah.
Was, okay, let's go ahead, that we're going to have to do this to get it. Let's get it now, and then we'll clean it up later. We'll
No,
fix it.
never going to happen.
When have we ever taken away an entitlement? It doesn't happen.
Well, interesting that you say that, Ken, because with the recent judge's ruling against the ESA bill, probably the only time you would be able to take that away would be this upcoming session.
One of the cool things about it, though, the way that it's getting kicked back, is their basic argument, or the other side of it, is we can't give public money to private. Okay. What about the Wyoming Business Council?
Okay, good example.
Ad infinitum. What about here the penny sales tax, the GTEP or GPET monies that are going
everywhere?
Government picking money. So I look at it as we can't lose.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that you can. But I do think, and Ken, I think you're absolutely right. When you create an entitlement, and one of the worst ones would be Medicaid expansion, because under current law, if the government provides, and this is such a weird phrase, but if the government provides health care, which is not the government doing it, but anyway, if there's an entitlement for health care and you give it to people, you legally cannot take it away, as it relates to health care. Education, I don't know if if that same principle would apply, but just think about it, right? If parents have the ability to send their kid to, pre-kindergarten or kindergarten or preschool or whatever you want to call it, and that continues for a couple of years, how difficult would it be to roll that back? I think that it would be almost impossible. And I think if you attempted to, you'd probably end up not being elected anymore. Not because it was the wrong decision, but because the public outcry would be so huge. So you can't take back an entitlement, and there again, that's a big reason to vote against the ESA bill. And it's not constitutional. There's no way that the federal government should have any business dealing with education. And I realize the U.S. Supreme Court has made several education rulings. I mean, the biggest one being Brown versus Board of Education. But they weren't saying that education was a guaranteed right in the U.S. Constitution. What they were saying is you can't create separate but equal, and that principle doesn't exist in reality anyway. So they were ruling on something that Congress created. The question was not whether or not they could create the Department of Education in the first place. And then the last one, I find this one on the Post to be, I don't know, just really contradictory. But anyway, his main argument is the Federal Review Committee, and let me just read this to you, creates a new standing committee to review actions of the federal government. The intent was good, but the practical effect was just another permanent bureaucratic structure. From the standpoint of limited government, it's difficult to argue how this was not just another expense and a step towards a full-time legislature. Okay, so first of all, House Bill 177, which did not pass, by the way, didn't create any more bureaucracy. It was a standing committee within the legislature. Now, there are a whole bunch of standing committees. I mean, you're on one. You're on the airport committee, right? What weird one?
Not anymore. Now, I'm on Cap Fin now.
Okay.
But there are standing committees, which there's basically 9 of those.
Yeah,
I
minerals,
think.
appropriations.
Yeah, the major committees. And then there are task forces and other groups put together. And among those of us that support this idea for a standing committee is the complete intent not to, they can say, well, you're just making government bigger. No, actually, and probably it needs to be specified in the bill, we need to get rid of a bunch of these other ones that really don't serve a tremendous purpose. One of them that they wanted to get rid of was
the Bean Committee. The Bean Council.
No, that's different. That's different. that is bureaucracy. This is a task for legislators. Basically, what we're saying is our focus needs to be on where are the feds overreaching and
Right.
how do we stop it. And one of the ones they wanted to get rid of, and I say they, of course, that's the rhinos and the other side, was Management Audit Committee. Oh, we're not using that.
Oh, we are now.
We can, sure should be. So there's some disagreement about that. But the one you mentioned, the air travel, that one could simply go away. There are a lot of issues with that. It's an interesting one to sit on. But there is room to stop doing some of the stuff we shouldn't be doing and pay attention to the things we really should be doing. And that's the impetus behind this.
Right, right. And the argument that it's creating more government, well, you're using the existing legislators that you have, and okay, yeah, so it's creating another committee, but it's within the legislature itself. It's not a bureaucratic structure, and I don't really see how you could argue that reviewing committees and policies and federal mandates and deciding whether or not they're constitutional or if they're federal overreach is a bad idea. I just don't see it. I mean, I think that this is an incorrect argument.
It's very common practice to just add a task force willy-nilly, whatever. I'm not
willy-nilly.
And I really, to be fair, you shouldn't say willy-nilly, but that is a common practice. New task force, new missions. And then the problem is a little bit like an entitlement. Once you've got people working on a particular thing, do we later say, well, this doesn't matter anymore? Well, of course it still matters. The question is, did we accomplish what we set out to accomplish? Well, probably not.
Well, and here's the thing, right? It's okay. We can quibble about whatever bills were chosen to evaluate. If you look at Wyoming, they chose a vote on an amendment on the budget as one of the votes that they rated. And so, I mean, we can argue back and forth the legitimacy of whichever bill was chosen. But the truth is, if you are a conservative, you should vote conservatively regardless of what bill it is. It shouldn't matter. And so the subject matter on which you vote really is not the issue. How you voted on that subject matter is what is at issue.
Interestingly enough, last year I put all these on a spreadsheet and somewhat weighted them. And that's an arbitrary,
Sure.
in the beauty's in the eye of the beholder thing. But I put all of them I could find. I think I had about a dozen different rating things and then aggregated them. And the numbers that came out at the end of that were very similar to virtually every one of them independently and really close to Doug Gerard's. And Doug, if you're out there, we miss you, man.
Yeah, well, and here's the other part of it too, that all of these different ratings agencies, it doesn't really matter which one it is, whether it's the John Birch Society or whether it's a WyoVote or WyoRhino or Evidence-Based Wyoming or even some of the national ones. They all tend to pretty much line up on who's conservative and who's not conservative. And the point is that if you are going to vote conservative, you're going to do that across the board, regardless of what the bill is. And that's what these ratings agencies tell constituents, is that no matter what the bill is, this is how you're going to vote. And that's the whole point. We'll be back in a minute.
Everybody say,
It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those guys that listened to the president just a little bit too closely and now you're tired of winning? Are you getting the feeling that there's been way too many good things happening in our country and you just can't take it anymore? Well, if you are, and you think you should follow Rosie O'Donnell's example and get the heck out of Dodge, you need to call Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She'll make those foreign country living ideas a reality for you. All you have to do is call 307-699-3519, and she'll make sure some freedom-loving, red-blooded American will now live in the home that you no longer want. If you want to sell your house, or if you want to buy one that's way better than the house you have right now, give Rebecca a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy State Politics is only going to get stronger. This program is only going to continue to expand. Don't miss the Cowboy State Politics podcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. And, of course, Cowboy State Politics live almost every Tuesday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Coming up on the program, just to kind of give you a roadmap of where we're going. I've got a couple of great interviews lined up. Supposedly, we're going to be talking to Secretary of State Chuck Gray on Friday. We're going to record an interview and then hopefully be able to play that for you next week. And then in a couple of weeks, I've got an interview that I'm really excited about. It's going to be on September 3rd, I think. But it's with an author, and he's written a new book about Wild Bill Hickok. And he's uncovered some new stuff, looked at some different documents, interestingly enough, unearthed them in another state. So anyway, we're going to talk to him about his book. I should have a copy of his book here in the coming days, I would think, so I can read it. It's going to require me to go down to Buffalo and do a little bit of research as to, and I'm almost positive that Wild Bill Hickok was around this area. And whether it was Sheridan or Buffalo, I'm going to find out. And we're going to have a straight history discussion with this guy. I can't wait to do that interview. So that's coming in September. The point being is that we've got a lot of really good content coming from Cowboy State Politics Live, and you just don't want to miss it, man.
You might want to stop by the old Sheridan Inn here, too. They still have a lot of guest books, and they know who's in there.
Yeah. Well, that was on my plan. You know, and who knows? You know, a lot of these Old West figures ended up here. And at one time, I think it was it was either 1883 or 1886. After the big fire in Deadwood, they rated Buffalo, Wyoming as the most dangerous town in America. And I want to say it was 1886, but I'm not sure. I'll find that out too, just to get the date right for you. But think about that. A little town in northeast Wyoming, the most dangerous town in America.
Well, that were both your family and my family there. So
well, yes. I mean, and if you talk to some of the people in Buffalo, they would say they would definitely put me in the bad character category.
They don't even know who I am.
Yeah, they do, Ken. Yes, they do. Anyway, speaking of some bad characters, there's still some district court judges that are defying the Supreme Court. And I mean, who would have guessed? They're all Biden judges. But this is from the Daily Caller. Federal judges keep defying the Supreme Court orders against the Trump administration. Federal judges are increasingly ruling against the Trump administration's agenda and in defiance of Supreme Court orders. The executive branch finds itself fending off endless counter opinions from federal judges in the courtroom as it continues to implement its hardline immigration policies. Okay, so this is the Daily Caller. They're not exactly a conservative organization. So, you know, yeah, of course, they're going to call Trump's plan hardline. And again, they're with the labels. Anyway, while the Trump administration has scored major victories in the nation's highest court, including successfully reining in the scope of nationwide injunctions by federal judges, some have chosen to defy Supreme Court rulings. U.S. District Judge Gia Cobb, an appointee of, you guessed it, the Biden administration, blocked the Trump administration on Friday from using a process known as expedited removal to quickly remove illegal migrants from the country, according to court documents. The order could, at least for the time being, dramatically curtail the White House's ability to carry out its deportation agenda. In a public statement, the administration spokesperson said, quote, Judge Cobb is flagrantly ignoring the U.S. Supreme Court, which upheld expedited removals of illegal aliens by a 7-2 majority. Homeland Security Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin said in a public statement, this ruling is lawless and won't stand. Similar cases have been playing out, and, the article goes on to talk about a number of different decisions by district court judges. But the whole question here is the Supreme Court has already ruled on a number of these issues, and district court judges continue to defy the Supreme Court. And I mean, this is lawless behavior. I think in its purest form, when a subservient court says, yeah, we're just not going to pay any attention to what the big guys say. Screw that. We're going to do our own thing. It is lawless behavior. It is, in many ways, anarchy. When you're just not going to pay attention to our system of laws, which I think is exactly what's happening here. But it's just another example of courts going off the rails, off the reservation, as it were. And here's another one, DEI. Now, the Trump administration on day one did away with diversity, equity, and inclusion in a lot of different areas. And the administration has been going back and forth with colleges and universities about their DEI policies. Well, The Blaze has a piece out this morning entitled, The Trump Administration Quietly Ends Carter-Era Decree on Government Hiring, and it could lead to, quote, seismic changes. And I quote, the Trump administration quietly ended a decree from the late President Jimmy Carter that introduced diversity, equity, and inclusion policies into government hiring practices decades ago. The decree was the result of a 1979 Supreme Court filing in Luevano versus Ezel that the government civil service exam was unlawful because Black and Hispanic applicants were not passing it at the same rate as white applicants. I mean, obviously, the reason why they weren't passing the test is because of the color of their skin. I mean, that was the assumption from the Carter administration. And so they made, affirmative action ruling to say, well, no, you have to hire these same sort of people.
Obviously, the test was rigged.
Obviously, it was.
Yeah, you had to be a racist in order to pass.
Now, okay, so let's talk about that. For example, voting exams. During the Jim Crow era, there were voting exams that African American citizens could not pass simply because the literacy rate in that community was far lower than it was for their white counterparts. It was absolutely racist. The test in and of itself was instituted to prevent Black people from voting. This is not that. This is, one of these things is not like the other. And to say that just because of the color of your skin is a determining factor in whether or not you can pass a test. I mean, the Carter administration's policy was racist from the very beginning. And most of the racism we see now is against white people. And I've got another piece in the, actually it's coming up next in the stack of stuff. Maybe you saw the mob attack in, let's see here. Let's see where exactly it was. Cincinnati, where the white woman was beaten to a bloody pulp. And the politicians, the people in elective office there are saying, well, that's because the white woman deserved it. Blatant racism. I mean, and we'll get to this piece in just a second. But the Office of Personnel Management has tried to create a test 6 times, but failed, leading agencies to be forced to hire workers without any similar testing. With the end of Carter's decree, government workers can be tested without officials worrying about the disparate impact on minorities, contingent, of course, on any new court challenges, which I'm sure are going to come, with all of these district court judges, ruling against the Trump administration just because he's, orange man bad. Quote, for over 4 decades, this decree has hampered the federal government from hiring the top talent of our nation, said Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon, who, by the way, we interviewed on Cowboy State Politics. You can go back in the archives and find that interview. So it's a great discussion. In a statement from the Justice Department, today, the Justice Department removed that barrier and reopened federal employment opportunities based on merit, not race. And that's how our country was founded, ladies and gentlemen. We were and are supposed to be a meritocracy. You have an equal opportunity to succeed in this country. This is what separates one of the things that separates America from the rest of the world. We don't have an aristocracy. You don't have to be rich to succeed. You don't have to be born of a certain family in order to have opportunities. Everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed. Now, I'm not saying everybody will. I mean, certainly not everybody is the same, but you have the opportunity to succeed, same as everybody else.
If you're Nancy Pelosi, you have an even greater opportunity because some animals are more equal than others.
Yeah, George Orwell's, what was that, Animal Farm?
Yeah, Animal
Some
Farm.
pigs are more equal than others.
Exactly, which, not to totally derail it, I read another Ayn Rand book over the week when we were gone.
Wow.
And
how
this
ambitious of
this
you.
is a short one. It was written in 1937, and it's called Anthem.
Ah, that's a great book.
It is essentially the core of Atlas Shrugged in a weird way, but some of the same arguments were in there, but a lot of thought-provoking things in there. And I didn't mean to necessarily distract from that, but if anybody's interested, Ayn Rand's Anthem is an interesting book. I'm not saying I agree with it, but it's very, very thought-provoking. And a lot of the things that we're talking about here are incorporated clear back in 1937. She's talking about this is the ultimate end of where we're headed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's just talk about Atlas Shrugged for a minute. And if you've, okay, so I struggle with Ayn Rand. I don't know anybody who can take 30 pages to describe the color red, but Ayn Rand can. And it's a really long book, but essentially, and there's a number of movies, 3 movies, I think, that were made about Atlas Shrugged, and they pretty much follow the plot line. It's not very often that you get a movie based on a book that actually follows the book. This one does. And admittedly, they get progressively worse as the movies go on. But the whole plot line of it is the inventors, the entrepreneurs, the people who have ambition.
The J.P. Morgans, the people, the big industry leaders, the people that make things happen.
Yep. They are, and I guess I'm searching for, I'm having a hard time with my vocabulary this morning, but they're basically being not subsidized, pushed into submission by an overpowering government that is straight up socialism. And Ayn Rand was writing about socialism when she wrote this book, that the government doesn't necessarily own the means of production, but they tell industry what to do. And all of these movers and shakers, the entrepreneurs, the inventors, as Ken said, the people that make things happen, they pretty much just quit. And they say, you know what, our efforts are not being acknowledged, our efforts are not being recognized, and we're done. And they just start disappearing in the book.
Hence the title, Atlas is holding up the world, and Atlas shrugs and drops the world, and just says, I've had enough. So and those elements are also in the Anthem thing where somebody just finally realizes that everything is wrong and goes and starts over. And that idea, both in Atlas Shrugged and in Anthem, and I never read Fountainhead, so I can't go there, but that idea is so inviting. It's like when New Orleans fell apart after Katrina. There was a big part of me that just wanted to say, okay, let's just put a big wall around it, let them take care of each other.
I heard a theory over the weekend when we were on our little adventure. We were talking with a couple, and I heard a phrase that I had never, an idea that I hadn't thought of, is that God hit the reset button on New Orleans with Katrina. He just said, oh no, I'm tired of this. Reset. I don't think that's actually what happened. But anyway, back to Atlas Shrugged and trying to get back to the reservation.
Well, he did promise never to destroy the world by water again.
Yeah, I mean, there's that little thing.
Maybe a small portion of it.
So the part I disagree with in Atlas Shrugged is I have never been the person to just give up. I've never been the person to say, you know what, I've had enough, I'm out. I'm moving to what was it? Galt's Gulch is what it was called in Atlas Shrugged. That's where you get the phrase, who is John Galt? Because it's John Galt who's going to all of these movers and shakers and entrepreneurs and industry titans and saying, hey, what are you doing this for? You know, the government is not appreciating you. Come with me. We'll do it a different way. And these folks just disappear. And the only thing they leave behind is a note that says, who is John Galt? And, you know, I understand the premise. In many ways, I sympathize with the plot line of Atlas Shrugged, but I've never been the person that can just give up. And you know, it's Dagny in the book. It's Dagny Taggart, who is the one who says, "I'm not giving up," and she's the one that builds the rail line in the book, and all of these other industry titans. Of course, you know, she ends up in Galt's Gulch and asks for help, and you know, they're able to help her, but she's the one that doesn't give up.
Yeah, it's very hard to build a rail line when you can't buy steel.
Yeah.
You know, and so the key for the guy that was putting it together, his name wasn't really John Galt, was it?
No, it wasn't John Galt. It was.
But his key was to, if you got somebody like Dagny and her railroads that are holding it up, then you find out what she's dependent on fuel, she's dependent upon steel.
Yes.
You take that away from her. And eventually we can't survive without each other, which is kind of contrary to Ayn Rand's whole.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting contradiction.
But it definitely is an insight. And when I read Anthem, it had to have been like a precursor to that, where she's just starting to put the how to express this as a novel.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, and so back to the piece in the Blaze. One of the reasons why you see businesses fail is because of policies that are not based on a meritocracy. When you force businesses to hire people who are not qualified and who they don't want to hire, you end up getting a mediocrity. That everything is mediocre, that nobody succeeds. And I mean, that's the biggest problem with socialism, is when everybody is equal, no one is exceptional. When everybody is equal, you're all equally poor because no one succeeds. Did you ever watch that movie? It was kind of a cartoon documentary called I Want Your Money. It was made during the Obama administration. There's this great cartoon scene where Ronald Reagan is teaching a class of all these politicians, and there's Arnold Schwarzenegger and Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and George Bush are in there, and Sarah Palin's in the class, and he tells the story of a teacher who, you know, had a class that was very interested in socialism, and he said, okay, so we're going to run an experiment. And he said, you know, we're going to take the test and we're going to average all the grades, and everybody at the end of it gets the same grade, gets the average. Well, the first test, the people that studied hard and really tried, well, they tried hard for their A, and the people who never studied and never worked, well, they didn't do anything else because they're going to get a much better grade anyway, because all the grades are going to be average. And so the average grade in the class was a B. Well, when the second test came around, the people who usually studied really hard, didn't really study as much because everything's going to be averaged anyway, so why should they work really hard? And the folks who didn't study and never worked hard, they worked even less, and so the average grade was a D. And then in the third test, when the third test came around, the folks who really worked hard, well, they didn't work at all, and the folks who never worked, well, they didn't do any work, and the average grade was an F. Socialism always leads to mediocrity, which is the problem with DEI. Now, there are some people that are very upset about all these DEI programs going around, and I bet you can guess what their major argument is. And I've got a little video for you. It's from a news program. Go ahead and play cut number 3, video number 3. Maybe.
President Trump continuing a record-setting flurry of executive actions with a new series of orders that aim to end all federal diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, programs. President Trump's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, telling NBC News in a statement, quote, President Trump campaigned on a merit-based society where people are hired based on their skills, not for the color of their skin. For decades, the Urban League has been working to improve the economic and social conditions of Black Americans. Tonight, that agency's leaders are calling the president's executive order a step backward.
What they really seek to do is erase 70 years of civil rights progress that we've had in this nation.
This memo sent from the U.S.
All right, that's enough. Well, you heard what he said, that this executive order erases 60 or 70 years worth of civil rights advances. So he's admitting that all of these DEI policies are nothing but racism. If he's equating the civil rights movement and all of those advances, and obviously that guy's a racist, but if he's equating all of that to DEI, then obviously the DEI measures are racist, that they're not based on meritocracy, that they are just simply based on the color of your skin, which is exactly the opposite of what Martin Luther King was arguing for, when he said that we should be focused on the content of one's character and not on the color of their skin. The piece ends this way, quote, being able to recruit the best and brightest to work in Washington returns dividends for the country by doing more with less, the AFL Vice President Dan Epstein told Fox News Digital. That's what all Americans deserve from their government. It's simple. Competence and merit are the standards by which we should all be judged. Nothing more, nothing less. And that was U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro. By the way, she just got confirmed. I think that's fantastic. Judge Jeanine will make an excellent U.S. attorney.
So did Brian Nesvik.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of his.
Well, no, but I am a big fan of delisting grizzlies.
Yeah, me too. By the way, did you see there is a piece on the Cowboy about wolves? Apparently, there's a judge that says we should reevaluate our handling of wolves.
I just spent the last week out of cell range and off the internet, and I got to be frank, I did not rush back to the cow pie. So no.
Well, most people don't, but this is the business I'm in. You know, you gotta make sure you know what the competitors are saying. But yeah, anyway, there's a federal judge has ruled that we have to reevaluate. And let me see if I can just pull up the article while we're talking about it. We have to reevaluate our management of wolves, and it was a lawsuit that was pushed by a bunch of radical environmentalists. And that's how it all starts, always. Let's see here. Well, I saw it on the cow pie. Guess it's not there anymore, or at least I can't find it. Nope, I don't see it. I'll look for it during the break, and maybe we can find it. But basically saying the same thing that all these federal judges have said, that we erred when the federal judge said we could delist wolves, and now people in Wyoming are whacking too many of them. Well, that's because wolves breed probably faster than rabbits.
They haven't done real well in Colorado either.
Well, that's because, weird. Those Colorado wolves, they don't understand imaginary lines, and they end up wandering into Wyoming and end up on Wyoming ranches where they're shot. All right. Well, we're pretty much at the top of the hour. Let's go ahead and take our second break, and when we come back, I'm going to tell you about this mob attack in Cincinnati. It's a horrible situation, and it's another example of where our society is headed. But we'll do that when we come back.
Ever since gold backing was removed from the dollar, the value has dropped significantly over the past few decades. Experts say this is one of the main reasons goods are more expensive and your savings are worth less each year. How would you know how many dollars to save for retirement if the valuation of the dollar changes over time? Would you work all week for that $20 gold piece? Let's look at the valuation of this coin from the 1970s to today. When President Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, this coin traded for about $275. Today, it trades for about $14,000. Buying and holding rare coins using only a fraction of your portfolio is our suggested way to save for the future. Call U.S. Coin Capital at 1-800-878-2646 to get your free United States Gold and Silver Buyer's Guide.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Welcome to Lessons in Civility by Morton Buildings. Gentlemen, is your garage completely jam-packed full of all of your unnecessary crap? And your lovely wife has been on your tail, nagging you nonstop to clean it out? It's not because she just wants to incessantly irritate you. Chivalry dictates that you should clear out a space so she can park her car inside and you don't end up sleeping on the couch anymore. To do that, contact Nick and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. Not only are they the experts in metal building construction, they're also skilled at keeping you out of the doghouse. One more time. Their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out at their website, mortonbuildings.com. This has been Lessons in Civility from Morton Buildings. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm David Iverson, doing what I was born to do each and every day with talent given to me by God himself. Welcome back to the program, my friends. It's Cowboy State Politics Live on a Wednesday. If you want to be part of the program, the phone number here in the studio is 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989. If there's something on your mind that you want to talk about, go ahead and give me a call. So before the break, I told you that I saw an article on the Cow Pie about wolves, and just turns out I didn't look hard enough, but I found it. And let's see, there it is. Okay, so federal judge's ruling could open the door to putting wolves back on the endangered list. And again, radical environmentalists, quote, a federal judge on Tuesday issued a ruling ordering the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to reconsider wolf policy in Wyoming and other states, which could open the door to wolves being relisted as an endangered species. The Fish and Wildlife Service, and this is quoting from the judge's ruling here, the Fish and Wildlife Service broke the law last year when it denied a petition from a coalition of environmental and animal welfare groups calling for wolves to be relisted as an endangered species. The coalition of environmental and animal welfare groups petitioned the Forest Service, or Fish and Wildlife Service, in 2021 to put them back under federal protection. The FWS rejected that petition this past February, and so the groups filed a lawsuit in U.S. District Court. The judge ordered the Fish and Wildlife Service to reconsider whether to grant wolves endangered species protection in Wyoming, as well as Idaho, Montana, parts of Washington, Oregon, and Utah. Malloy also concluded that, quote, the agency unlawfully disregarded the potential importance of the wolves' fledgling return to Colorado through natural dispersal and historic reintroductions, and the agency denied the petition. All right, so first of all, the Wyoming Game and Fish are the experts in wildlife management. And I'm not just saying that, I mean, it is a fact. If you go to any other state, you'll find that their wildlife management policies in no way compare to that in Wyoming. For 12 years, I lived around Appalachia. I lived in Virginia and Tennessee, and in that entire 12 years, and I worked out in the gas field. The gas fields there are on top of coal mines, So I was out in the boonies all the time, almost every day, every other day. And in 12 years, I saw 2 buck deer, 2. And they weren't even big ones. They were young ones, little fork horns. But if you come to Wyoming, the chances of you seeing a giant buck in Ken's backyard are pretty high. In fact, he's probably got 2 or 3 of them feasting on his hops that are growing out there. That's pretty normal here.
Yeah, that's why we can't have nice things.
It's why you can't have nice things. Where the house I used to have in Buffalo had a big backyard with a couple apple trees, and every year about this time and into September, you could walk out the back door and you'd see 3 or 4, pretty nice bucks eating the apples in the backyard. But what are the reasons for that? Well, there's a couple of them. Deer aren't stupid, and they know that they're not going to be hunted most of the time in city limits. But even if you go, driving in the mountains, or if you go out east of town into the plains, you're going to see wildlife, and that is a credit to the Wyoming Game and Fish. They're experts at managing wildlife populations, which include wolves. And it's not just wolves aren't predators in the majority of Wyoming because we don't like wolves. We don't, by the way, but wolves are extraordinarily prolific. And so the Game and Fish decided, hey, in this part of Wyoming, you can shoot them. They're predators.
Yeah, as good as they are, I still have to say I find a little bit of fault with them. I think the way they've handled the mule deer population is disgraceful. And
I wouldn't go that far.
I've had several discussions. I've had several discussions with them. But then I'm a little bit biased because, my granddad used to be the head of the Game and Fish back in the 40s. He was in the department until about 1968. And he would tell me in those early 60s, he said, these people don't know what they're doing anymore. They sit in their office and they fill out forms. And, part of it is just there's that old school mentality. This is the way it used to be. It was so much better.
Well, and I think that we can definitely make an argument that the Game and Fish has a huge bureaucracy, and they do. They're one of the big coffee cans in Cheyenne, but I think that the work that they do with wildlife is first rate, second to none, and a lot of states could learn a lot from. And so, for some judge who probably knows absolutely nothing about wildlife, and that's the other problem I have with all these federal judges. There's a guy, Judge Rudolph Contreras. He's the one that has, been front and center with grizzly delisting. And he's written at least 2 orders denying the delisting of grizzly bears. The guy doesn't know anything about wildlife, doesn't know anything about bears, and he's just a federal judge in Montana that he just rules in favor of environmentalists. I mean, that's what he is. He's a radical tree-hugging, pinko, commie environmentalist.
I wonder what would happen if we put a half dozen grizzlies in Central Park.
Now that would be interesting.
Even just a half dozen wolves.
Yeah, either one. I mean, and here's the thing: they're predators, and federal judges, environmentalist groups, they just think that they're cute little puppies. But anyway, so there's the piece. It's on the Cowboy. You can go read it for yourself. But I told you that there was this mob attack in Cincinnati, and I'm not even going to show you the pictures. Just take my word for it. This lady got the crap kicked out of her bad, and the pictures are pretty bloody. But this piece from the Blaze is entitled "Cincinnati Official Who Said Mob Attack Victims Begged for Beating Doubles Down," and this was after the woman who received the beating published a video on TikTok. I mean, it's brutal, man.
I was just thinking, can't we all get along? What was his name?
Rodney King.
Yeah, you look at the beating Rodney King took compared to what she took.
Woo.
Not even
in
close.
The same
class.
No, I mean, this woman got the crap kicked out of her. From the piece, quote, "The Cincinnati city council member who made headlines last week for saying mob attack victims begged for the beating they received sat down for a video interview in which she doubled down on her perspective. Quote, 'You never start a fight with a white person, but if they hit you first, that becomes a reason for all,' and listen to this, 'all of the frustration and hurt and terror of generations, historical generational pain to be released.' And I believe that's what happened. And so this altercation that happened, and I haven't watched the original video, what happened in the crowd. But basically, there was this group that was walking through a big crowd, and there was a verbal altercation, and then the beating happened. So I don't know who hit first. I don't think that it really matters. You don't pound on a defenseless woman like this, and I mean, it was really, really bad. The woman shared her video with the station and asked to be identified only by her first name, Holly, and thanked everyone for all the love and support. It was very humbling, quote, that you've spent your prayers, your blessings. It's definitely what's keeping me going. Okay. So Bernie Moreno of Ohio last week shared the grisly images of Holly's face that appeared to have been taken soon after the attack and showed her with the horrific black eye and massive bruising. I mean, and it looked to me, and I'm no doctor, but it looked to me like her orbital socket was broken, and I mean, it was bad. Cell phone video of the mob attack shows Holly, who was wearing a blue dress, apparently trying to intervene on behalf of a beaten-up man, but instead, another female punches her in the back of the head, and seconds later, a male punches her in the face, knocking her flat on her back on the street. And I mean, I don't think we really need to go much further, except to ask, is this where we're really at? That it's okay to beat up on young women? Is it that it's okay to beat up on women, period? That or anybody for that matter? That you happen to disagree with them? I mean, I understand the fist fight in the bar. I totally get that. I'm not saying that's right, but this is a totally different arena where people are just randomly beaten to a pulp, and we've seen a lot of this. I mean, there's a lot of video of people being beaten up on the streets of New York City and just being pounded, like, random strangers just being beaten. And, I think we really need to examine where we're at. And here's the other thing. Prosecute these people. A lot of this crime, a lot of these attacks happen because we're not prosecuting criminals. And, Ken, you and I have talked about this a lot. We talked about this with the former Chief Justice, that if we actually prosecute people, follow the laws that are written, and give them the sentences that's mandated in law, a lot of this stuff would stop. And but there again, I mean, you got to change their hearts too. And it's I think we just really need to examine where we're at. So, on a completely different note, let's go back to the defund the police era, when we were toppling statues of people that we disagreed with. Somehow, if we knocked over a statue of a guy named, say, Albert Pike, then maybe that's going to right all the historical wrongs. My friends, a statue is just a statue, and the reason we have them is to remind ourselves of where we were in the past. And normally statues, except in Sheridan, because you get dumb rabbit statues, but normally statues are of, prominent figures in American history. And there's one of them that was pretty high profile in Washington, D.C., that was toppled, and it was of General Albert Pike. Now, Albert Pike was a general during the Confederacy. That's absolutely true for the Confederacy. But he was also a pretty high up in the Freemasons. And legend has it, not legend, but history has it, that the Masons lobbied Congress and Washington, D.C. to have his statue erected in the Square of Justice in Washington, D.C. A news report from News 4 D.C. is entitled, "Confederate General Statue Toppled in 2020 to be Reinstalled in D.C." And I quote, "The National Park Service will restore and reinstall a statue of Confederate General Albert Pike that demonstrators toppled and burned in summer of 2020. A statue of the Confederate General, the bronze statue depicting Confederate General Albert Pike is being restored," the Park Service said in a statement on Monday. Officials shared a video of the worker removing the corrosion and paint. Quote, "The restoration aligns with federal responsibilities under historic preservation law, as well as recent executive orders to beautify the nation's capital and reinstate pre-existing statues." And I've got a video of it. It's video number 1. Ken, go ahead and play this. This is from News 4 DC. I think it's News 4.
Statue of a Confederate general that was toppled by demonstrators back in 2020 will be reinstalled. Today, the National Park Service announced the statue of Confederate General Albert Pike is being restored here and will return to Judiciary Square in just a few months. News 4's Walter Morris has the new information tonight.
You could call it a comeback. 5 years after protesters brought down the controversial statue of Confederate General Albert Pike, Monday, the National Park Service announcing the statue will rise again here at Judiciary Square. NPS releasing this photo showing crews working to remove paint and corrosion from the bronze statue that has been held at a secure location since it was taken down. The Park Service saying in a statement, the restoration aligns with federal responsibilities under historic preservation law, as well as recent executive orders to beautify the nation's capital and reinstate pre-existing statues. You may remember the dramatic scenes playing out on live TV June 2020, just feet from DC Police headquarters. Demonstrators using rope to topple the Pike statue, then dousing it with lighter fluid and setting it on fire. The statue was originally dedicated in 1901. Pike was a leader of the Freemasons, but for years, many had called for its removal due to his alleged leadership role in the Ku Klux Klan after the Civil War. After the announcement, D.C. Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton condemning the decision, saying Confederate statues belong in museums, and she will reintroduce a bill to permanently remove it, saying, quote, the decision to honor Albert Pike by reinstalling the Pike statue is as odd and indefensible as it is morally objectionable. A statue honoring a racist and a traitor has no place on the streets of D.C.
It really just reminded me that they don't care.
The news not sitting well with activist Jason Charter. The anti-fascist organizer was arrested in 2020 after the Pike statue came down, but the charges were dropped. He says this reflects a troubling trend.
They want to bring back these values that almost destroyed our nation during the Civil War, almost destroyed our nation during the Civil Rights Movement, and in the past 10 years, especially since George Floyd has died, has almost destroyed the nation. And
can't listen to that guy anymore. The point being, my friends, is that history is just history. It's neither good nor bad. It just is. And the reason why we study history is to understand the mistakes of the past, and the hope is that you won't recreate them, that you won't do the same thing twice. And to just topple a statue, that doesn't really fix anything. In fact, I think what it does is it tends to hide whatever bad things were there. And it's the same thing as I don't know, burning old photographs. It doesn't really do anything except makes it harder to remember those things.
I think that's a great point. And I think there is an assumption that if there is a statue, you are honoring that individual and you are desiring to go to that perceived, basis of values. And I would agree with you. This is more a historical thing. If we forget that these things ever happened, we're going to go back and do it again. Stone Mountain, Georgia, I don't know if you've been down there or not, but magnificent work of art, for one thing. And to stand there and gaze at it and marvel at what was there does not necessarily equate to, I agree with these people and I want those days to come back.
No, it doesn't at all. But there again, let's talk about Albert Pike for a minute and the Freemasons. The Masons go back to before the founding of our country. Many prominent founding fathers were members of the Masons. Most prominent of those, of course, was George Washington. But the Masons played a huge role in the founding of the country. And it is absolute historical revisionism to claim that Albert Pike wasn't an influential figure. Okay, so maybe he was flawed, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it erases everything that he did before. And the example that I use all of the time is, why are there Robert E. Lee statues at universities? It's not because every university was a fan of the Confederacy. I mean, I think that's a sophomoric view of who Robert E. Lee was. The reason why you got statues at universities is he was a big education guy and spent the rest of his life, supporting universities. And it just so happened that he was a Confederate general. And here's the other thing too, that it is a historical mistake to think that your heroes from history are always heroes, or that the villains from history are always villains. The truth is that some of the people that you think are good sometimes turn out to be bad, and some of the biggest villains, well, you'll find out that maybe sometimes they weren't so villainous.
Yeah, Robert E. Lee was not a Confederate because he wanted slavery to continue. He was a Confederate. In fact, he'd been offered positions in the Union Army.
Yes.
He was a Confederate because of his loyalty to his home state and his people.
Mm-hmm.
And that loyalty caused him a lot of sleepless nights, I'm quite certain.
Well, another good example was George Washington a slave owner? You bet he was. So was Thomas Jefferson. So were many of the founding fathers. But it was George Washington who wrote in his journal that his owning of slavery was a stain on his soul. All right, and so we can argue that yeah, he was a slave owner. Yeah, it was wrong, but that doesn't erase all of the good things that that he did. Similarly with Thomas Jefferson. I mean, both Thomas Jefferson and George Washington worked almost tirelessly to outlaw slavery in the colonies.
One of the pitfalls we have is we try to judge every historical figure by today's standards in today's world. And my dad, for a while, was an ordained pastor here in Wyoming, and he had a liquor license. The reason he had a liquor license is because he had a cafe. He didn't serve any liquor. They did sell some beer through the gas station, but that maintained the value, and he looked at it as a little bit of, well, the word escaped me, but he's trying to keep the value. If in those days when slavery was universal, it was everywhere. That was part of the value of the plantation or of the farm or whatever it was. And it's irresponsible at times to devalue that. Now, this is from one perspective, but we never can fail to say the nation that he helped found, almost single-handedly at times, was the nation that actually did come around and resolve slavery and lead the way for the rest of the world.
Yeah, and I think that the other the other thing that's important to remember is that these figures from history are not one-dimensional characters. They are not just one thing and that thing alone. That they're human beings, and human beings have failures. Now, okay, so Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner. He was also the author of the Declaration of Independence, and if you've never read the first draft of the Declaration, the biggest portion of it, and on July 4th, we read the first draft of the Declaration of Independence, or at least that big paragraph. The biggest part of it was the biggest, I guess, insult to the king about slavery. It's amazing. You should go back and read it. Now, it wasn't included in the final draft because the colonies in the South never would have signed it. The Constitution, another great example. The 3/5 compromise. It's the biggest historical time bomb that you've ever seen. Because at the time, the founders knew that the population of the North, where most of the abolitionists, where the abolitionist movement was the strongest, was gaining faster than the population of the South. And so, with the writing of the Constitution, our founders knew that at some point in the near future, they would have more representation in Congress and they'd be able to do away with slavery. Now, in the end, it didn't really work out that way until the Civil War. But I mean, it's an amazing example of the brilliance of our founders. Were they men? Yep. And were they flawed men? Yes. But did they create something that was amazing? Yes. And the point I'm getting to here is that history is neither good nor bad. History just is. And the point is that we ought to learn from history, and so that we don't make those same mistakes in the future. And unfortunately, one of the big mistakes that we constantly make, and I am constantly amazed that the idea of socialism, no matter how many times it dies, continues to rear its ugly head. That is one of those lessons from history that apparently we're unable to learn, no matter how much we study on it. So anyway, Albert Pike going back up into Washington, D.C., where it rightfully should be. So Ken, I know you've been on vacation a little bit, so maybe you haven't followed the fallout from all this Sydney Sweeney thing. I think it's amazing what's happened.
I did see a meme with President Trump.
President Trump has good jeans too.
And then somebody else had one up there that said, "It's not a boy cat if you can't wear jeans anyway." I don't remember who said that, but
well, it's amazing because Sydney Sweeney, that ad is simply a return to good advertising. Everybody's heard the phrase that sex sells. That's what American Eagle is doing.
Effective advertising anyway. So I guess if your goal is to sell stuff, then you could call that good.
Well, yeah, it's absolutely effective, like a good attempt at advertising. And the left is going absolutely bonkers simply because Sydney Sweeney is an attractive young white person. And of course, we've been told for 8 years that we really shouldn't be focusing on people who are attractive. We have to be inclusive. Well, the meltdown is continued, and Jesse Waters had a segment on this. I think it was last night, but it's wonderfully funny. It's cut number 5. Go ahead and play that video.
The dating scene's tough right now. At least that's what Johnny tells me. But it's even harder if you're looking for someone who keys Teslas and hates ice.
I don't think there's anything harder than finding a liberal boyfriend.
Who would want one?
Where is he?
Not voting
Not
for
even a liberal,
Kamala.
like maybe like a Democrat, like a registered Democrat. I just want to find a dude that voted for Kamala Harris. I'm really struggling.
Young guys might never vote for Kamala again after what Sydney Sweeney just did.
Watch this.
Democrats tried to cancel her because she said she had good genes in an ad. Instead of caving, American Eagle doubled down. Not only did they not apologize, they put up a massive billboard in Times Square. Even the Pentagon's getting in on the action. Here's Pistol Pete flaunting his good genes. Wall Street loves the Sweeney bump. American Eagle shares soared nearly 25% today. Doesn't hurt that Sweeney can shoot like John Wick.
Watch this.
Wow.
9:21.
Oh my God, girl. That's your first time? That was really good.
You're going dog nuts. I mean,
Ready, girl. Yeah.
And she knows her way around a car better than Tampon.
Welcome back to Sid's Garage. I'm going to be doing some maintenance on my vintage Mustang. Join me.
Denise, who did the Sydney Sweeney ad? Well, get him in here.
Exactly right. And the left is going apoplectic about it because it's going back to what sells. Good advertising.
I think there's an underlying thing here. Is no matter what is. You were talking about it with history. History just is. Also, what truth is. And it doesn't matter how bad you want something else to be true. What's true is true.
Yep.
And the truth is, a lot of guys like to look at Sydney Sweeney.
Heck yeah.
Okay. What was his name? He called himself the Grizzly Man. He went and lived with the grizzly bears. And he had himself persuaded for a long time that the bears love me. They've accepted me as one of
their own.
They
loved him, all right.
Yeah. And so he really wanted to believe that. But the truth is, they ate him.
Yes, exactly right. And, thank God we're moving back to a place where maybe we're getting some form of reality back to things. That the lies that the left pushed for 8 years, 4 years of Biden and the first 4 years of Trump, thankfully, we're getting back to a place where, it just feels normal. I don't know how you feel about what's going on, Ken, but to me, it feels like things are actually getting back to reality, getting back to normal. I'm pretty happy about it.
Well, you have that pendulum swing, and we had swung pretty far left, and now Gen Z is more conservative in some ways than generations before. And I've actually heard some pretty interesting things about the idea of Gen Z swinging so far right that Nazism becomes popular again, and racism and those things. And I think that's a distortion, first of all, of what Nazism was. It was socialism.
Yes.
But it'll be really interesting to see how far this goes in the next generation and watch the pendulum swing.
Hey, go ahead and throw up. I'm sitting here looking at the monitor in the studio, and Fox News, they're talking about this very thing, Sydney Sweeney.
Different reasons. One has drawn criticism and ridicule The other is either drawn praise or a benign indifference.
And they're both drawing reactions. Take a look at this. The Pentagon got in on the fun, posting Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and writing, quote, SecDef has great genes. President Donald Trump, of course, posted about it. Quote, Sydney Sweeney, a registered Republican, has the hottest ad out there. It's for American Eagle, and the jeans are, quote, flying off the shelves. And that is exactly what's happening. American Eagle's stock is up since debuting its campaign 2 weeks ago. And Trump says that's because the tides have turned and being a Republican is now cool.
You'd be surprised at how many people are Republicans. That's what I wouldn't have known, but I'm glad you told me that. If Sydney Sweeney is a registered Republican, I think her ad is fantastic.
And on Truth Social, Trump pointed to Bud Light and Jaguar as examples of woke advertising gone wrong. American Eagle is not backing down from the criticism, posting a statement on Instagram that the phrase Sydney Sweeney has great genes is and always was about the genes. We'll send it back to you, Harris.
All right. Yeah, but the point is that we're getting back to normal, I think. Things that are actually true.
Yeah, in my day, it was where's the beef?
Yeah.
And there are triumphs in advertising, and they quite often they're when we start to move back to reality.
So where do you think, Ken, where do you think the point was where the left kind of went over the cliff with all of this woke craziness?
Oh, Victoria's Secret.
You think so?
Yeah, they stole Victoria's Secret away.
I mean, I think that was bad. I mean,
yeah, no, I don't think
screw that up?
I don't think there was a point. I think it's a little bit like the proverbial frog in the boiling water. And at some point, somebody stood out on the street corner and said, "Hey, the emperor doesn't have any clothes on."
What about and you and I've kind of talked about this before, but what about the stupid Jaguar ads? I mean, I don't know if you saw those, but they had there wasn't even a picture of a car in it. And it was these, androgynous figures. And I mean, it was a really ridiculous woke ad that had nothing to do with the car. And Jaguar sales like tanked. I think we did a story on it. I think they sold like 17 Jaguars in a month.
Well, I started to tell this story earlier, but there's a mistake that people make where you think that you can stop the tides, When I've said before that my dad used to teach at Tulane, and after they built several new buildings, they wanted to lay out where the sidewalks were. And the president of the university looked at the plan, and he saw what were probably going to be some issues because people have human tendencies. So he said, "Don't build any sidewalks for a year." And then after the year, he came out there, and you could see where people wanted to walk. They had grooved a trail. I would go from A to B. And he said, put a sidewalk there, put a sidewalk there, put a sidewalk there. There are things that are as natural and as unstoppable as the tide. And if you think you can resist it, if you think you can push it and change it, you can do so for a point for a while. But eventually, the pressure is going to build up behind it, and it's going to come back. And that's why I don't think there was really a specific point when this happened, but it was inevitable that there was going to be some pushback.
Well, and just think about Times Square. You and I talked about there was that statue of the overweight woman that they, like 15-foot tall statue that they erected in downtown New York. Now compare that to the giant billboard or the video screen of Sydney Sweeney laying out there in her jeans. I mean, for me, the contrast is, it's day and night. I mean, it's
so. Are you proposing
different.
Then that we remove that pillar of fenders down by the creek and put up
Yes,
the statue
I
of
am.
Sydney?
I am waiting for somebody to drive over that thing. I mean, I think that would be so appropriate. And it's I think it's ironic that I have to drive by it every day coming to the studio.
I want to get one of those stickers that they put on abandoned cars. This must be moved within 72 hours.
When do you think? How long do you think it's going to be before people start putting bumper stickers on all the bumpers? I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet.
It's horrible.
I mean, it is. It's on like right by the Wells Fargo building in Sheridan, and if you drive by, it's this dumb pillar of bumpers that are wrapped around. I mean, it's the stupidest looking thing, and anybody who thought that was art. Man, whatever job they have, they need to be fired because it's terrible. We'll finish up when we come back. Apparently, there's a bunch of town councils that they don't want you to know what they're doing. We'll talk about it next. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live, moving along on a Wednesday. I'm your host, David Iverson, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. You know, there's a friend of mine that's been doing a lot of writing on all this, the big nuclear issue, and I just want to give her a shout out. Her name is Dawn Marquardt, and if you haven't read her work, I suggest you go look it up. I think she's doing fantastic. I mean, there's not that many people that do a lot of research before they write, most of which you get in the mainstream insipid Wyoming media is opinion. You don't really get fact, and Dawn's been doing a good job. But the reason I want to give her a shout out is she issued the equivalent of a retraction. Well, I guess it's not the equivalent. It is a retraction. She got a fact wrong in one of her pieces, and she corrected it right after she figured out that it was wrong. And so bravo, Dawn. Well done. And it's not, I'm not saying give her, applaud that she was wrong. I'm saying she deserves credit for admitting that there was a mistake in her piece and that she went back and corrected it. And the reason why that's important is the mainstream media, they don't do that. They have this opinion that they are always right. And even when they're wrong, the Cowboy is notorious for this. They go in the middle of the night and stealth edit their article so that you never know that they made a mistake. And the newspapers, they're worse. You know, when they issue a retraction, it's on like page A21 in the back buried in the classifieds.
Yeah, even if they make a mistake, I think they feel like they're justified. It's the same deal. We don't have to pay attention to ethics. Because the ends justifies the means. Mm-hmm. And we've had that discussion several times as well.
Well, right. And, I think that it says a lot about her credibility that she, and if you read her articles at the bottom, there's all the footnotes, like everywhere where she got all of her information. It's listed out there. You can read it for yourself. You don't have to, I would suggest that you read her writing, of course, but if you want to look up and read all her sources, you can go do that. So good job, Dawn. I'm very proud of you. Nice work. Now, there's a letter to the editor in the Cowboy that I saw this morning, and it's entitled "Shoshone Town Council Meeting Should Have Remained Open." In Wyoming, we have what's called the open meetings law. I think that's what it's called. There's the Open Records Act and then the Open Meetings Law. But anyway, in Wyoming, public meetings have to be open to the public. And the only time you can go into executive session is either for a legal matter or for a personnel matter. Other than that, everything that you talk about has to be out in the open. The public has to be able to hear the discussion. They have to be able to hear how their elected officials vote. And across the Cowboy state, I have noticed that there's been a tendency for town councils, city councils to go into executive session for whatever reason that they want and try to hide what's happening. You see this a lot with the school board, too. Now, of course, the school board, I mean, it's easier for them to hide stuff because they've got so many employees. But meetings should be open. Now, in this piece, let me just read you the first couple paragraphs here, or lines. You know, the Cowboy, this is another thing that irritates me about them. They don't publish paragraphs. They publish sentences. You know, they're, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm being a grammar Nazi, but it just irritates the crap out of me.
Small words with lots of pictures.
Small words, lots of pictures. But anyway, here's the first couple of sentences. Quote, I'm a Shoshone resident and a former town council member. In July of 2024, I made a presentation to the Shoshone Town Council regarding approximately 20 potentially illegal executive sessions that were held to discuss, quote, real estate. Several news media outlets featured coverage of that town council meeting. Some of them also called the executive sessions into question. The town council seems to have gotten the message, as subsequent discussions involving real estate have been during open session. At a July 8th, 2025 meeting, the Shoshone Town Council discussed an offer made to purchase a piece of town property. The offer came through a real estate agent that the council had fired 7 months prior. Let's just say that the transaction looked suspect. Okay, so he goes on to talk about, you know, the real estate transaction and the open meeting. But there have been a number of cases across Wyoming of town councils, city councils, county commissioners going into executive session for reasons that don't exactly pan out. And the reason I bring this up is government has a tendency to try to hide whatever it is that they're doing behind closed doors. And, you know, the results of that are that, you know, the public finds out about it at the last minute. And town councils, it doesn't matter if you're the legislature, if you're a board on a special district. And actually, the board that I was on, we couldn't even go have lunch together, because the likelihood of us discussing business during lunch when all of us get together is pretty high, because we would have a quorum sitting at lunch. Same thing holds true for a city council. If they have a majority of people having lunch or drinks or whatever, that's a quorum. And the public has to be open to it. And so town councils, city councils, it doesn't matter. All of those meetings need to be held out in the light of day. And I mean, we have a representative democracy, a representative republic. Excuse me, we don't have a democracy, we have a republic. But all of our elected officials, they work for us. They don't work for themselves. They're not some, you know, sitting in some ivory tower. We're their boss. And so and they need to treat their positions as though they are employees, that you report to your boss, and it's not the other way around.
Yeah, some of them every once in a while need to hear, you forgot who the hell you work for.
Exactly right. No.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a perfect example in that minerals committee. And if you still have that soundbite from Rose?
I probably do, but by the time I find it.
Well, anyway, so here's the long and the short of it. During the minerals committee meeting, Rose, who's okay, go ahead and play the soundbite.
On June 30th by phone requesting a copy of the application at 8:50 a.m. I received an email at 10:43 a.m. denying my request.
Rosemary, are you talking about this bill, or are you talking
I'm talking about
now settle
I'm
down.
talking about
Settle
we
down.
the people, and I'm talking about what has happened and how this has been shoved through and why you need to simmer down and not shove it through.
You are out of order. You're done. You're done. The fellow with the kids, he can be next.
You forget who the hell you work for.
You bet. You betcha.
All right. You betcha.
We did not get.
So the point there is that Rose was explaining to the Minerals Committee how many different meetings had been held about this radiant nuclear deal that's been going on, and how many of those the public was kept out of. There's a similar situation happening down in Platte County. This one isn't nuclear, it's a wind project, but the Platte County paper has been excluded from some of their meetings. You see, the public has to be involved in all of this. And the problem is you have elected officials that have their own agenda that want to keep stuff from we the people, because maybe what they're doing is not exactly above board, but the way that you make sure that it is above board is you include the public. You do everything out in the light of day.
Even if it is above board, there is a certain arrogance, and I know because I've been a part of many of these, where you've done a lot of research on it. The general public out there hasn't. They're going to be kind of reactionary. You think you know what needs to be done, and I can see where a lot of people honestly believe I do know best, and we should do this. So you want to do it with as little interference from people who really don't understand the situation as possible. And so you just go ahead and make up the decisions, and then when you have a public hearing, we saw it in Sheridan County, for example. How long did we go until Holly was elected with nobody ever having a nay vote?
Yeah.
It was obvious that they had already made up their mind, this is where we're going to go, and then we're going to go have a public performance that kind of lets that through. I'm not abdicating that that's how it should be by any means. But I'm saying I can see how it becomes like that.
Over the weekend, I had a conversation with Speaker of the House, Chip Nyman, and we were talking about this whole nuclear thing. And he said, if the public is opposed to this, it doesn't matter if it's the right decision or the wrong decision. If the voters don't want it, the voters get what they want. And it's not the prerogative of an elected official to say, well, you don't really know what you want, so we're going to do it anyway. This is what's best for you. No, you don't get to do that. It's the voters that get to do that.
Okay, he's exactly right, and I've made the same point, that it seems to me that the powers that be haven't done what they should have done to sell this idea to the public. But on the flip side, and I always try to turn things around so that I make sure that I'm fair, when it comes to, for example, the Article 5 Convention of States, if the vast majority, 70, 80% of the people want it, I'm still going to resist it. I'm going to do it openly. And then later I can say, I told you so. But as a representative, that's literally what I am. I can't lose sight of the fact that if my population is totally against something, I need to be acutely aware of that and pay some heed.
Well, and that's the way that our system works, is that we have representatives, right? And I'm not saying that a representative has to, run their district like a democracy. That's exactly what our founders wanted to avoid, is that, and this is the idiocy of people like Representative Julie Jarvis. I'm not saying she's an idiot. I'm saying her idea is idiotic, that she's going to poll all of her constituents and then make her decision based on a poll. That's not how our system was set up. However, you should be acutely aware what your constituents want, and the way that you get to that point is by being available to them, by holding town halls, by engaging with them whenever possible, and that way you make an educated decision. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying that you make an educated one.
Yeah, that is the reason, is the public doesn't have time to go through and learn all the ins and outs of every issue that we have to do. So we send a representative, we understand how they think. You go down there, you look at these things, and we'll trust you to vote like we would if we were so informed. So that's all well and good. But when it comes down to the example that I gave earlier, where Convention of States and 80% of the county is opposed to it, guess what? I'm the wrong representative. They need to find somebody else.
Right. And here's the thing. I mean, we live in a representative republic, and it is impossible for Ken or anybody else to talk to all 10,000 of his constituents. Probably even during an interim. I mean, you could hold a town hall meeting like every day of the week and probably not talk to a third of your constituents. But the point is, you need to interact enough to where you're making an educated decision. But the way that you make sure that your decision is correct is that you hold all of the meetings out in the public. And when you get a huge pushback, like Wyoming citizens overwhelmingly saying they don't want this nuclear stuff, then you need to heed that. And the problem is that they're not. And so anyway, I mean, I hope that our elected officials have gotten the message on this, but I doubt that they have. So the pushback continues. So there's an interesting piece from the Federalist this morning, and there are a number, and it's talking about, and I'll tell you who this is in just a second, but there are a number of people who have been elected to Congress in, bigger, more populous areas. And the reason they got elected is, because they were social influencers, that they were social media type folks. And you can tell, I mean, they're always on TV saying really inflammatory stuff. And there's one of them who has pretty much openly admitted that her position in Congress is a side hustle to her full-time social media influencer gig. And I'm talking about Yasmeen Crockett. This is a piece from the Federalist, and I quote, "When Democratic firebrand Yasmeen Crockett appeared to be profiled by The Atlantic, she probably expected just another bootlicking puff piece that would add to her leftist street cred and fundraising numbers. What she got was a surprisingly balanced account of her background and meteoric rise in a collapsing political party, which is why she repeatedly tried to spike the article. Perhaps Crockett was incensed by the embarrassing anecdote that staff writer Elaine Godfrey related at the very beginning of the piece. During her quixotic effort to be named the leading Democrat on the House Oversight Committee last month, Crockett whined that she was, quote, feeling a little used by her colleagues. When Godfrey asked her about her failure to get the post, she said, it's like one clear person in the race, and that has the largest social media following. And as if that explained why she should be handed power and responsibility on a pallet. Godfrey's journalistic honesty was accidentally revealed an inconvenient truth about the new blood of the American left. Crockett and her ilk aren't true public servants, but social media influencers who are representing the American people as a mere side hustle. This narcissistic approach to their duties makes them dangerous to the body politic." And I've got a video of Yasmeen Crockett. Fair warning, there's a little profanity in this one, but it is cut number 4. Go ahead and play it.
Who the Democratic nominee is going to be, we're going to win. But what are we going to need to do then? For me, it's getting aggressive. Now listen, I'm not going to say this what we're going to do, but I'm telling y'all what my vision would be. Number one, this Supreme Court is corrupt. So again, serving on the Judiciary Committee, there are bills that we have put into place. We need to have some real guardrails around this Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court has paved the way for half the stuff that we see that's going on. Listen, Donald Trump is a piece of shit. Okay, we know that. Yes, he is. But in a functioning democracy, he still would not be able to get away with this. But he's been able to get away with this because the House Republicans are complicit. He's been able to get away with this.
All right. So you notice there's no explanation whatsoever to back up anything she says. And it's her attempt to, be provocative that is, I think is most indicative of her social media influencing behavior. Just throwing out like accusations without any proof whatsoever. She says that the Supreme Court is corrupt. Okay, well, I have a real problem with that word, because we throw around words a lot, and I don't think that there's any explanation behind them. I mean, words mean things, and when you say that a person is corrupt, it means that they're engaged in criminal type behavior, that there's something nefarious that they're doing, that they are doing something untoward. There's a sign over by my house, and there was one on 5th Street. I don't know if it's still there, but it says the Freedom Caucus is corrupt. Okay, explain how. Give me an example, because I'm not aware of one. I'm not aware of any criminal behavior that they're engaged in. And if they were corrupt, if there was some nefarious thing that they were involved in, I would be the first one to call them out. But I am not aware of it. You see, you can't use. You can, but you shouldn't use words like corrupt without having any definition behind them. And then Crockett goes on to say, well, he's a. Well, you heard what she said, what she called the president. Really? So that's what counts as political discourse now. But I think what it tells you is that her intent is to be provocative. It's not to be explanatory, and you could hear it from the soundbite that she was talking to a pretty sympathetic crowd. I'm sure the place was the sign behind her said "Move On." I'm sure it was a MoveOn.org event. But the whole point is that she's not attending to her duties, rather trying to be more provocative. And the Federalist, I think lays this out pretty clear. Quote, one of the more disturbing aspects of social media is how it grants unscrupulous users the ability to craft a false identity for themselves. For Crockett, this persona is the tough black girl from the Dallas streets. She regularly hurls viral insults at people, such as Marjorie Taylor Greene, Governor Greg Abbott, or Hispanics who voted for Donald Trump. It was Yasmin Crockett who called Governor Abbott Governor Hot Wheels, is what she called him. I mean, clearly derisive, clearly provocative. Though she wrongly characterizes these antics as forthrightness, Godfrey refuses to buy into Crockett's charade. She reminds her readers that Crockett hails from St. Louis, where she attended a private high school before going to Rhodes College, a small liberal arts school in Tennessee. The closest Crockett ever got to life on the city streets was a role in the musical Little Shop of Horrors in her college days. And so it is crafting a social media persona. And the persona that she's and the vehicle that she's using to craft that is her not her seat, but her election to a seat in the United States House of Representatives. But I don't think that she's there to be a statesman or solve problems for her constituents. I mean, it's like the Federalist argues that it's merely a side hustle to boost her profile on social media, because that's where that's her main gig.
It's kind of interesting because I can relate to this. I played the same game a little bit.
Really, social media influencer?
Not so much social media influencer, but playing to a crowd.
Oh.
And I hate to say this, but one of the reasons that it bothered me when Hillary, depending on where she was speaking, would stand up and kind of create this Southern drawl.
Right.
Yeah. I play that game too. There are certain times when I'm addressing a crowd when I want to be underestimated. The time we did Convention of States, and what's his name was there and got him all mad because I told the fart joke.
Oh yeah.
But I do it better than these people do. So, but creating a persona. You look back at Yasmin, and you heard about her background, where she went to the Rhodes School. Is that affiliated with the Rhodes Scholar people?
No, different.
Or different. But anyway, she definitely had, but she adopts this persona, and what she's doing is projecting who she thinks she's talking to. And so when she talks the way she talks, like she came just off the streets of East St. Louis.
The mean streets of the private school.
Yeah, that's how she perceives the people she's talking to. And I say that because I understand, because I do the same thing. But because I do it better, I don't mind it when I do it.
Well, and it's but I think it's different, right? There's a difference between knowing who you're talking to, knowing your audience, and certainly, if you're talking to a county central committee meeting, it's a pretty sympathetic audience. Though, I mean, there's definitely some redcoats in there. Some of them admit to being redcoats. But by and large, it's pretty sympathetic. So you can say things like, they're not going to touch my guns and I'll protect them, and you'll probably get a huge amount of applause. I think that's different because you actually talk about substance, at those events. But yeah, I mean, okay, so you got to know your audience, but it's different than being a social media influencer.
And the other truth of the matter is, and you touched on it, I really am one of them. That's where I came from.
Sure.
And I know, but to pretend like you came from some people you don't have anything in
it's a total
common,
false persona.
That's what I'm getting at too. You saw Hillary do it over and over again wherever she was at. Quite frankly, you see Governor Gordon do that.
Oh yeah.
Maybe not with a tile, not so much with the style of speech, but just adapting his message to please whatever crowd is there.
I remember one of the first events I was at right after I started the program was a Central Committee meeting in Cody, and Governor Gordon he was there, and you would have thought that he was packing 6 guns with the gun belt, and he was the most pro Second Amendment guy around, but at the same time didn't allow guns in the Wyoming Capitol. I mean, when he was at the Aramico thing, I mean, there was no idea that he ever said that getting rid of fossil fuels is part of the solution to climate change. I mean, you never would have assumed that. He was the most pro-energy guy that's ever been. But behind the scenes, he is making deals for carbon capture, and he's the big government pro green climate change liberal that he's always been.
We often say if we're going to interview somebody with whom we disagree, we're going to let them talk.
Oh, yeah.
And the more that they talk, the more that they will expose inevitably who they really are and how they really think. And turning that back on ourselves. You and I have been doing this kind of game for, 5 years roughly?
Yeah. Going on 6.
I can't think of a topic that we haven't addressed at some point, either independently or together. There are hours and hours and hours of each of us out there. I see that as an advantage. I see that as transparency. People know who I am.
Yeah, you don't have to.
And if they
ask any
don't
questions.
know, it's their own fault.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, and then there's other people like Alex Padilla. Alex Padilla was the guy that went. That got thrown out of the meeting that Kristi Noem was holding when he lunged at the podium. Well, now he says that illegal immigrants are just long-term residents who happen to be undocumented. Now, Alex Padilla knows exactly what an illegal alien is. You can't be in Congress and not know that. But he's speaking to a crowd. Go ahead and play video number 2, cut number 2. This is Alex Padilla.
First, I want to talk to you about another issue that you're deeply engaged in, the issue of immigration. The Trump administration is touting record low illegal crossings at the southern border. You've obviously been very critical of the president's deportation policies. You were very outspoken, for example, at a press conference of the Homeland Security Secretary wound up getting handcuffed there. But do you give President Trump credit for these record low crossings at the border?
Look, we should debate how the reduction in crossings has come about, but I think most importantly, let's look at the different pieces of what the immigration system looks like. Border security, everybody agrees we need an orderly, humane border. There's an element of people wanting to come to the United States, and how those programs need to be modernized and updated. My focus has been on the people who have been here. Millions of long-term residents of the United States who happen to be undocumented that have been the target of this administration's increasingly aggressive and cruel.
So long-term residents who just happen to be undocumented. Alex Padilla knows.
2 plus 2 is 4, not 5 if you want it to be 5. And this is not to be discriminatory. This is to stand up for language. Words mean things.
Exactly right. Yasmin Crockett, Alex Padilla, they are performance artists, and that's all that it is. And and their election to the House of Representatives is nothing more than an attempt to boost their own profile and their pocketbook, for that matter. But anyway, my friends, we burned through another busy broadcast, 2 hours on the program. We'll be back tomorrow at 8 a.m. for another issue of Cowboy State Politics Live. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. See you tomorrow, my friends.